got Gönenç Gürkaynak, who is a partner at ELIG Gürkaynak, attorneys at law in Istanbul, and spends a great deal of his time in London, and spends a great deal of his time everywhere else, because he's hugely involved in these cases. So a fantastic panel. Right, Gönenç, last but by no means least, let's hear from you and from a legal perspective on this.
Sure, thank you. So I think there's a macro question that we need to address, particularly when we're discussing market definition issues, but in general as well. And that is the question of, are we moving away from legal certainty too much? Market definition, sure enough, serves a purpose of also the market participants understanding how they are going to be viewed and what they can do and what they cannot do. So when we define market definition as a tool of understanding competitive constraints, that is correct, but I think it's incomplete. I will also argue that we shouldn't do away with market definition so easily, or if we are doing that, then we should look for ways of coming up with tests and thresholds and principles that govern the understanding of market participants as to where they are in the marketplace and what they can do and what they cannot do. So far, almost everything that you have heard today says we should move from market power, which is understandable, especially when it comes from an economist's perspective, because market power is the reality of what needs to be kept under control, and market definition is a tool. And I'm not contesting that. But I would say that when discounting market definition and focusing on market power, you shouldn't take it to a degree where you are a referee giving a speech about what a penalty is in a football game, and you say, I can't define a penalty, but I know one when I see one. If you go into that distance, then you yourself are going to be hindering innovation in the marketplace with your enforcement, because there's going to be too much unpredictability. So I think in the recent years, we're very used to thinking of big tech companies needing to be under control, and whoever takes a bigger bite from big tech companies seems to come across as doing a more cutting edge and progressive enforcement, which may be true. But at the same time, those bites should always be justified and embedded in legal principles, and market definition can help in that sense, be it a framework of thinking and intuition, which is what SNP is in my mind. So as a practitioner, if I were to get a question from Richard, what is SNP to you? I would say it's a framework of thinking. I wouldn't go about using SNP in a digital market, but I think it is useful as an intuition, along with an understanding that it shouldn't only be based on price. It also should be tested, cross-tested with small but significant non-transitory decrease in quality, a small but significant non-transitory increase in costs, and those kinds of functions. And the totality of it is not going to be controlling in the outcome of the analysis. So I don't suggest that whatever market definition says should be the outcome, and I would agree with my fellow speakers that market definition shouldn't take the lead in the analysis. But I think we're on the brink of doing away with it and not replacing it with anything. And all this talk about market power is alarming in the sense that it does go into I know one when I see one kind of a thing. It is on the brink of being a bootstrapping exercise, if you will, in the sense that the industry participants won't be able to understand exactly what it is unless they do it, and then it gets condemned. If that were to be the rule of the game in an innovative market, this would lead you to lose a lot of legal certainty. Now, also another term that we haven't discussed a lot today is ecosystems. And ecosystems are actually new. So Richard said, and I agree, there isn't much new that is going on in the competition law realm. It's true. The fundamental concepts are the same, only our behavior toward them are changing. So it's interesting that, for example, someone wouldn't quote Oscar Bronner's, McGill's, Volvo v. Wang's of the world as jurisprudence anymore in these fields, but Kodak suddenly emerges as something that we hold on to because it is an attempt to do away with market definition, and it goes into the effort of I know market power when I see it. Well, Kodak also is dealing with a product that has nothing to do with the type of products that we're dealing with today. And so if we're doing away with Oscar Bronner's and McGill's and Volvo v. Wang's and Ladbrokes of the world because we feel it's not enough, or the players of today aren't meeting the essential facilities type thresholds of that day, and we now have an imminent feeling that we have to interfere, at least we should not bring in Kodak or the likes while we're moving away from market power, I would say, and we should also concentrate on making sure that the industry participants have a means of understanding where they are in the overall scheme of things. In that sense, I think, saying three things as to what does market definition do. Market definition does give you context, and this has been discussed. But market definition also allows you to observe effects in a relevant market. That may not be that critical either. But the third thing, which we don't generally discuss, is market definition also allows us to have a feel of what the consequences of an isolated piece of enforcement will be. So if we can encapsulate the entire ecosystem, if we can understand what the ecosystem is and define the market properly, then we have an understanding of what this step of enforcement is going to lead to in the near future. Even engineers are finding it difficult to speculate on these things. When we get to them, to the engineers, and show them a decision, this is what the decision says now. What do you say? They start thinking about what it does to the product, how the ecosystem is going to be impacted. They don't agree with each other. So I think we should come to terms with the idea that it's not easy for competition agencies, for lawyers and economists to feel smug in the idea that their piece of enforcement is definitely going to lead to the results that they intend. And those spillovers can be kept under control and can be factored in at the point of writing the decision if there is a genuine effort of defining the market, and market definition from that perspective is also particularly important. If you are completely moving away from the idea of market definition and you're turning it into an exercise of reverse engineering, basically, a real legal realism exercise, the law is what the judge says the law is type of an exercise, then you will end up in first coming up with the decision, then reverse engineering yourself into a market definition just because it's required when writing the reasoned decision. And that is not going to help with the legal certainty expectations of the industry participants, which may in turn show itself in less of innovation, and it may show itself in a counterproductive outcome in terms of welfare maximization. Last sentence on this is a little akin to competition agencies starting to say, remember, we were protecting competition. While protecting competition, our target was economic efficiency, and all this was done to maximize welfare. Now we're speaking in terms of welfare. We're not talking in terms of competition or protecting competition anymore. We have evolved. We're not speaking about economic efficiency either. We're talking directly about welfare. We think this piece of enforcement is going to increase welfare. It's going to be maximizing welfare. It will lead to a consequence of industry participants not understanding anymore what it is that we're talking about. And while technically it will sound appealing, we will lose a lot of tests and bright line rules along the way that help. So I would say, while we're throwing new concepts at the industry participants every day, be it tipping, be it gatekeeping, be it self-preferencing, and they're trying to cope with all of that, we should also make sure that we're keeping our interferences under control of legal certainty.
Thank you, Gönenç. Did I hear you say, I may have misheard, but did you say ecosystems are new at one point?
I would doubt that. If I did, I didn't.
Gönenç?
So I think the question on market definition, is it really giving you a lot of legal certainty, and what Soledad just said are mushing well together. And it allows me to allude to the following analysis. Normally, I would agree with this, because in all of our cases, in all of the cases all around the world in antitrust, there are two economists. They both claim that they're being very scientific about it, and they're saying black to the other's white. So clearly it's not that scientific. I mean, economy is a science, but the way it is handled and the data is slapped can actually lead to different results. That's understood, which in turn
lawyers are capable of doing.
Oh, lawyers definitely, but at least lawyers don't claim themselves to be embedded in science. So I think where this leads is at the point of breaking new ground and defining an entirely new market. There isn't much legal certainty to be attained through the concept of market definition. But are authorities going to adhere to market definitions that were recently done? Are companies going to be able to rely on a defined market? If market share is not a good proxy of market power, then what are they going to substitute it with? These are, I think, still valid questions.